The city hummed below, a restless beast of light and sound. But up here, on the rooftop of a crumbling Brooklyn warehouse, it was just us. My heart pounded so loud I swore he could hear it, even over the distant wail of sirens. I'd spent years hiding, but tonight, with Ezra's hand brushing mine, I was tired of running. My name is Julian Carter, a 25-year-old graphic designer who'd moved to New York City chasing dreams and fleeing truths. I grew up in a small Ohio town, where being different wasn't just frowned upon, it was a sin whispered about in church pews. I'd learned early to bury who I was, to lock away the part of me that loved too fiercely, too differently. But Ezra Martinez, with his warm brown eyes and fearless laugh, had a way of unraveling me. We met 6 months ago at a dive bar in Williamsburg, where I was sketching napkins to avoid small talk, and he was charming the bartender into free drinks. Ezra, 26, was a community organizer, all charisma and conviction, with a smile that could make you believe in better days. He'd slid onto the stool next to me, glanced at my doodles, and said, "You draw like you're trying to tell the world something you're too scared to say out loud." I laughed it off, but his words stuck, like a splinter under my skin. Tonight, we stood on this rooftop, the city sprawling beneath us like a canvas of stars. Ezra had dragged me here after a long day at the community center, where he'd been rallying volunteers for a youth shelter. "You need to see the world from up high," he'd said, his voice bright with that contagious energy. I followed because saying no to Ezra felt like saying no to sunlight. "You're quiet tonight," he said, leaning against the rusted railing, his silhouette sharp against the neon glow. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. He knew something was off. He always did. I shrugged, shoving my hands into my jacket pockets. "Just thinking." "About what?" He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I wanted to tell him. God, I wanted to. But the words "I am gay," Ezra, I've always been gay stuck in my throat like glass. I'd spent so long pretending, crafting a version of Julian that fit into the world's expectations. The good son, the quiet artist, the guy who never rocked the boat. But Ezra wasn't the world. He was different. "Julian," he said, stepping closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." My chest tightened. I looked away, out at the city, where millions of lives pulsed in the dark, unaware of the war raging inside me. I thought of my parents, their disappointed sighs when I dodged questions about girlfriends. I thought of the kids back in Ohio, their slurs cutting deeper than I'd ever admit. And I thought of Ezra, who wore his heart like a badge, unafraid of who he was. "I'm not who you think I am," I said finally, my voice cracking. The words felt like a confession, a surrender. Ezra tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Then tell me who you are." I froze. The rooftop seemed to shrink, the city's noise fading into a dull roar. This was a moment I dreaded and dreamed of. I could lie, like I always had. Or I could leap. I'm gay," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. My face burned, and I braced for the fallout rejection, pity, anything but acceptance. But Ezra just stood there, his eyes softening, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Julian," he said, his voice warm, "that's not a secret. It's just you." My breath caught. No judgment, no recoil, just Ezra, steady as ever. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream at the sky for all the years I'd spent hiding. Instead, I just stood there, feeling the weight of my truth settle into something lighter, something real. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. The city kept humming, oblivious to the seismic shift inside me. But up here, with Ezra, I felt seen, and for the first time, I didn't hate what he saw. The next morning, I woke up in my tiny Bushwick apartment, the memory of last night buzzing in my veins. Ezra had stayed until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, his dreams of opening a youth center, my sketches, the way the city felt alive at night. We hadn't kissed, hadn't crossed that line, but his touch lingered in my mind, electric and terrifying. I met him later at a coffee shop in Park Slope, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans. He was already there, scribbling in a notebook, his dark hair falling into his eyes. When he saw me, his face lit up, and my heart did that stupid flip it always did around him. "You look different," he said, sliding a coffee across the table. "Lighter." I laughed. "Nervous?" "Yeah. Well, confessing your deepest secret at 2 a.m. We'll do that." He grinned, but his eyes were serious. "I'm proud of you, Julian. That took guts." I sipped my coffee, hiding the flush creeping up my neck. "It's not like I had a choice. You're too damn perceptive." "Maybe," he said, leaning back. "Or maybe you were just ready." We spent the day together, wandering the city, from the graffiti-covered walls of Bushwick to the quiet paths of Prospect Park. With every step, I felt a little braver, a little more myself. But beneath the joy, a shadow lingered. Coming out to Ezra was one thing. Facing the rest of the Worlmy family, my co-workers, myself was another. That night, we ended up at a queer open mic night in the East Village, a cramped venue packed with poets and singers spilling their hearts. Ezra knew the organizer, a trans woman named Lila, who greeted us with hugs and a knowing smile. The room buzzed with energy, voices raw and unfiltered, stories of love and loss and defiance. I sat in the back, sketching the crowd, my pencil moving faster than my thoughts. Ezra leaned over, his shoulder brushing mine. "You should share something," he whispered. I snorted. "Yeah, right. I'm not a poet." "You don't have to be," he said. "You've got a story. Tell it." I shook my head, but his words planted a seed. As the night wore on, I watched people bare their souls, their voices trembling but strong. I thought of my own story, the years of silence, the fear, the moment on the rooftop when I'd finally spoken my truth. Maybe Ezra was right. Maybe I had something to say. By the time we left, the city felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide who I'd be. Ezra walked me to my subway stop, his presence steadying me like an anchor. "You're gonna be okay, Julian," he said, his voice low. "More than okay." I wanted to believe him, but as I rode the train home, the weight of what lay ahead settled in. Telling Ezra was just the beginning. The real test was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready. The next week was a blur of work and restless nights. I threw myself into my freelance projects, designing logos for startups and posters for local bands. But my mind kept drifting to Ezra. His texts lit up my phone, funny memes, random thoughts, invitations to hang out. Each one felt like a lifeline, pulling me toward a version of myself I was still learning to recognize. But the fear was still there, coiled tight in my chest. I hadn't told anyone else. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not my parents. The thought of their reactions, disappointment, confusion, rejection kept me up at night, staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment. Ezra made it seem so easy, living openly. But I wasn't him. I didn't have his courage, his fire. On Friday, he invited me to a fundraiser for the youth shelter, held at a community center in Harlem. The place was alive with color banners painted by kids, music spilling from a makeshift stage, people of every age and background laughing and dancing. Ezra was in his element, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, telling stories. I lingered near the snack table, sketching in my notebook, feeling like an outsider in a room full of people who seemed so free. That's when I met Amara, a 30-year-old non-binary artist who ran the center's art program. They had a sharp wit and a warm smile, their locks tied back with a colorful scarf. "You're Ezra's friend," they said, peering at my sketches. "These are good. You ever think about teaching kids to draw like this?" I laughed, caught off guard. Me? I'm not exactly teacher material. "Why not?" Amara raised an eyebrow. "You've got a voice. Kids need to hear it." Their words hit harder than I expected. I'd spent so long hiding. I hadn't considered what I could offer. But before I could respond, Ezra appeared, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "Julian's got a lot to give," he said, his grin infectious. "He just doesn't know it yet." The night wore on, and I found myself relaxing, drawn into conversations with people who didn't care about the boxes I'd been taught to fit into. There was Malik, a 19-year-old trans kid who shared his poetry, his voice shaking but fierce. There was Sophia, a 40-year-old lesbian who told stories of sneaking into gay bars in the 90s. Each person I met felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was missing. But the high didn't last. On Monday, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was cheerful, oblivious to the storm inside me. "When are you coming home? Julian, your dad and I miss you. And Mrs. Thompson's daughter is single. You know." I gripped the phone, my stomach churning. "I'm busy, Mom. Work's crazy." She sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment. "You're always busy. Just don't forget where you come from. Okay." I hung up, my hands shaking. Where I came from. A place that had never felt like home. Not really. I wanted to tell her, to rip off the mask and let her see me. But the thought of her silence grew worse. Her tears stopped me cold. That night, I met Ezra at a diner in Midtown. The kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you Han. He could tell something was wrong the second I sat down. "Talk to me," he said, his eyes steady. I told him about the call, about the weight of my parents' expectations, about the fear that kept me silent. He listened, his face soft but serious. And when I finished, he reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You don't have to tell them yet," he said. "But you don't have to carry this alone, either. You've got me. You've got Amara, Lila, the whole crew. We're your family, too." His words broke something in me, a dam I'd built to hold back the fear. I wanted to believe him, to trust that I could build a life where I didn't have to hide. But the world wasn't as kind as Ezra's heart, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to face it. The next day, I threw myself into a new projectum mural for the youth shelter, inspired by the open mic night. I sketched late into the night, my pencil tracing lines of hope and defiance. Faces of people like Malik and Sophia, people who refused to be invisible. Ezra stopped by my apartment, bringing takeout and his endless optimism. "This is going to be incredible," he said, studying my sketches. "You're telling a story, Julian. Your story." I looked at him, my heart racing. What if I'm not ready for the world to hear it? He smiled, soft and sure. "You're already telling it. One step at a time." That night, as we sat on my couch, surrounded by sketches and empty takeout containers, he leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine. The air felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. I wanted to close the distance, to let myself feel what I'd been denying for so long. But fear held me back, a whisper that I wasn't ready, that I'd ruin this ruin us. "Ezra," I said, my voice barely audible. "What if I mess this up?" He turned to me, his eyes bright in the dim light. "You won't. Not with me." And then, before I could overthink it, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. For the first time, I let myself fall, let myself feel, let myself be. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. There was just Ezra and me, and a moment that felt like freedom. The kiss changed everything. It was like a door swinging open, letting light into a room I'd kept dark for years. But with light came shadows, and the days that followed were a tangle of joy and fear. Ezra and I were something now undefined, unspoken, but real. We didn't put a label on it, but every touch, every glance, carried a weight that made my heart race. We spent the next week inseparable, stealing moments between his work at the community center and my mural project. We'd meet for late-night walks along the Hudson, sharing stories under the glow of streetlights. He told me about growing up in the Bronx, the son of Puerto Rican immigrants, coming out at 16 and fighting for his place in a world that didn't always make room for him. I told him about Ohio, about the suffocating silence of my childhood, the way I'd learned to blend in to survive. "You're not blending in anymore," he said one night, as we sat on a bench overlooking the river. "You're shining, Julian." I laughed, embarrassed. "I don't feel like I'm shining." "You are," he insisted, his hand finding mine. "You just don't see it yet." But not everyone saw what Ezra did. At work, I overheard Whisper's colleagues speculating about my new friend, their voices laced with judgment. I brushed it off, but it stung, a reminder that the world wasn't as safe as Ezra's arms. I started to wonder how long I could keep this up, living half in the light, half in the shadows. The mural was coming together, a vibrant collage of faces and stories, painted on the side of the youth shelter. Amara helped me with the details, their steady presence grounding me when my doubts crept in. "Art's a weapon," they said one afternoon, as we mixed paint under the summer sun. "You're fighting for something with this. Don't forget that." I nodded, but the weight of their words pressed on me. I wasn't just painting for the kids at the shelter. I was painting for myself, for the boy who'd spent years hiding, for the man I wanted to be. But with every brushstroke, I felt the eyes of the world real or imagined watching, waiting for me to slip. That weekend, Ezra invited me to a family barbecue at his sister's house in Queens. I hesitated, my stomach knotting at the thought of meeting his family. "They'll love you," he said, his voice so sure it almost convinced me. "Just be you." The barbecue was chaos in the best way, kids running through the backyard, music blasting, the smell of grilled chicken and platanos filling the air. Ezra's sister, Carmen, a 32-year-old nurse with a quick laugh, welcomed me like I was already family. His parents were there too, their warmth tempered by a quiet scrutiny that made me fidget. I wondered what Ezra had told them, if they knew what we were to each other. As the afternoon wore on, I relaxed, caught up in the rhythm of their family. Ezra's mom, Maria, pulled me aside to show me her garden, her pride evident in every word. "Ezra says you're an artist," she said, her accent thick. "He says you see the world differently." I flushed, unsure how to respond. "I'm trying to." She nodded, her eyes kind but piercing. "Don't hide your light, Mijo. The world needs it." Her words hit me like a punch. I thought of my own parents, their expectations, their silence. I wanted to believe I could be the person Maria saw, the person Ezra saw. But doubt was a stubborn thing, and it clung to me like damp clothes. That night, back at my apartment, Ezra and I lay on my couch, the city's hum filtering through the open window. He traced circles on my palm, his touch grounding me. "You were great today," he said. "My family's crazy about you." I smiled, but my chest ached. What if I'm not ready for this? For us? He sat up, his expression serious. "You don't have to be ready for everything, Julian. Just be here, with me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the fear was still there, whispering that this was too good, too fragile. I kissed him, hoping to silence it. But the doubts lingered, sharp and unyielding. The next day, I got an email from my dad. Short, to the point. "Your mom's worried about you. Call us." My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to them since Mom's call, hadn't found the courage to tell them the truth. I stared at the email, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. But no words came. Ezra found me like that, curled up on my bed, the laptop glowing in the dark. He didn't ask questions, just sat beside me, his presence a quiet strength. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, echoing his words from the rooftop. "I know," I whispered. But knowing and believing were two different things. The mural was nearly finished, a riot of color and life that transformed the shelter's drab exterior. Kids from the center helped with the final touches, their laughter mixing with the sound of paint cans rattling. Malik, the young poet, added his own flourish, a line of poetry in bold red letters. "We rise by lifting each other." I looked at it, my throat tight, and thought of Ezra. But the closer the mural got to completion, the heavier the weight in my chest grew. My parents' calls were more frequent now, their voicemails laced with concern. "We just want to know you're okay," Mom said in her latest message. I wasn't okay, not entirely. I was falling for Ezra, building a life I'd never dared dream of. But the shadow of my past loomed large. I decided to call them, not because I was ready, but because I was tired of running. Ezra offered to be there, but I needed to do this alone. I sat on my fire escape, the phone trembling in my hand, and dialed. "Julian." Mom's voice was bright, too bright. "We've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I need to tell you something." The words came slowly, haltingly. I told them about Ezra, about the person I'd been hiding, about the life I was trying to build. There was silence on the other end, so heavy it felt like a physical thing. Then Mom spoke, her voice small. "Julian, are you sure? This isn't you?" My heart cracked, but I pressed on. "It is me, Mom. It's always been me." Dad's voice cut in, gruff and unsteady. "We need time, son. This is a lot." The call ended with promises to talk later, but the silence lingered. I felt raw, exposed, like I'd torn open a wound that might never heal. But beneath the pain was something else, relief. I'd said it. I'd claimed it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a coward. Ezra was waiting for me at the shelter when I arrived, his eyes searching mine. "How'd it go?" he asked, his voice soft. I shrugged, the weight of the call still heavy. "They didn't disown me, but they're not ready." He pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and sure. "You did something huge, Julian. Give them time." I nodded, but the ache in my chest didn't fade. I threw myself into the mural, painting late into the night, letting the colors drown out the hurt. Ezra stayed with me, mixing paint, telling stories, keeping the darkness at bay. When we finished, the wall was a testament to survival, to love, to the people who refused to be erased. The mural's unveiling was set for the following Saturday, a community event with music, food, and speeches. Ezra was buzzing with excitement, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. This was more than a mural, it was my truth, painted for the world to see. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. The night before the unveiling, Ezra took me to Coney Island. The boardwalk was quiet, the summer crowds long gone, the ocean a dark expanse under the stars. We walked hand in hand, the wind carrying the salt and the sound of waves. "You're scared," he said. Not a question. Terrified, I admitted. "What if Thesis, the mural, everything falls apart?" He stopped, turning to face me. "It won't. Not if we hold on to each other." His words were a promise, one I wanted to believe. We kissed under the flickering lights of the boardwalk, the world fading away until it was just us. Just this moment. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where I didn't have to hide, where I could love Ezra openly, fiercely, without fear. But the world had other plans. The next morning, as we set up for the unveiling, I got a text from my dad. "We're coming to New York. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. They were coming here. Now, when I was about to bare my soul to the world, I didn't know if I could face them. Not after everything. Ezra saw the panic in my eyes and pulled me aside. Whatever happens, I'm here, he said. You're not alone. I nodded, but my heart was racing. The unveiling was hours away. My parents were on their way, and the life I'd built felt like it was teetering on the edge. I looked at the mural, at the faces I'd painted, and prayed I had the strength to stand by Thembi myself. The unveiling was chaos and beauty, a celebration of everything the shelter stood for. The crowd spilled onto the street, kids laughing, music blaring, the air thick with the smell of food trucks. The mural glowed under the afternoon sun. Every face a story, every color a defiance. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart pounding, Ezra's hand in mine. Amara took the stage, their voice carrying over the noise. This mural isn't just art, they said. It's a promise to every kid who feels invisible, to every person who's been told they don't belong. Julian Carter made that promise real. The crowd cheered, and I felt a rush of pride and terror. Ezra squeezed my hand, his smile steadying me. You did this, he whispered. You. But my eyes kept darting to the crowd, searching for my parents. They'd texted an hour ago, saying they were close. I didn't know what to expect: anger, tears, silence. The thought of facing them here, in front of everyone, made my stomach churn. The speeches ended, and the crowd surged toward the mural, snapping photos, pointing at details. Kids from the shelter ran up to me, their faces bright with excitement. Malik hugged me, his voice thick. This is us, he said, pointing at the mural. You saw us. I smiled, my throat tight. You saw me, too. And then I saw the me parents, standing at the edge of the crowd, their faces unreadable. Mom's eyes were red, Dad's jaw tight. I froze, my hand slipping from Ezra's. They're here, I whispered. He followed my gaze, his expression softening. Go talk to them. I'll be right here. I took a deep breath and walked toward them, each step heavier than the last. The crowd faded, the music a distant hum. It was just me and them, the family I'd spent years trying to please, the family I'd feared losing. Julian, Mom said, her voice trembling. This is what you've been working on. I nodded, unable to speak. Dad stared at the mural, his eyes tracing the faces, the colors, the words. It's beautiful, he said finally, his voice rough. You're talented. The words were small, but they hit like a tidal wave. I waited for the but, for the lecture, but it didn't come. Instead, Mom stepped forward, her hand shaking. We didn't understand, she said. We still don't. Not completely. But we're trying. Julian, we love you. Tears stung my eyes, and I let them fall. I love you too, I said, my voice breaking. I needed to be me. Dad nodded, his eyes wet. We're not there yet, he said. But we'll get there. For you. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was a start. A crack in the wall I'd built between us. They stayed for the rest of the event, asking questions, meeting Ezra, listening to the stories behind the mural. It was awkward, messy, but it was real. That night, Ezra and I stood on the rooftop again, the city glittering below. The mural was done. My truth was out, and my parents were trying. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was a beginning. You were incredible today, Ezra said, his arm around my shoulders. You faced everything. I leaned into him, the warmth of his body chasing away the chill. I couldn't have done it without you. He laughed, soft and warm. You would have found your way. I just got to be here for it. We stood there, wrapped in each other, the city alive beneath us. For the first time, I felt no regret for being Minute, for loving Ezra, not for painting my truth, not for standing in the light. The road ahead would be hard, but I wasn't alone. I had Ezra. I had the community. I had myself. And that was enough.